Hello, fabulous friends and fans. Welcome to this special series. I'm doing a series of special topics in astrology, and they all come from questions and interactions that friends and fans just like yourself have had with me by reaching out on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and my website, nadiyashah.com. And this latest video is on the North Node in astrology. So right now, as I'm recording this, we are preparing for the North Node to change signs. Now, the nodes are calculated. They're not actual physical bodies in the sky. They're sort of the highest and lowest point in the sky that the moon travels, okay? So it has to do with the journey of the moon, because the moon doesn't travel in a perfect circle. It travels sort of at an oval shape. And depending on the nodes represent the highest points, if you will. There's the south node and the north node. They represent the highest points. So these are more accurately called chart points, okay? So they're like virtual points. And depending on the system of astrology, they are especially significant. Now, they're calculated. There are two different ways of calculating them. One is called the true node. One is called the mean node. Really, with astrologers, I encourage you to experiment and to see which one resonates as most for you. But it's close enough that we can say when something's happening with the nodes, that chances are, because it's only off by about a degree or so, when something's happening at your node, regardless of how you're calculating it, it does tend to represent a time when whatever energy is being placed there, and I'll talk about that in a moment, whatever energy is happening there is going to be experienced within a certain, perhaps wider time frame. But if you're really into it, as a lot of astrologers are, they like to get really specific on dates, then you can experiment using your own chart as to some of the signposts that would tell you where exactly your node is, and that in turn can lead you to understand what calculation methods are working best for you, and therefore will work best for the other people whom you will serve with your practice. So the north nodes are more important in some systems of astrology than other systems. But I know that for me, I'm very influenced by the evolutionary school of astrology, esoteric astrology as well. And in these systems of astrology, the nodes represent the promises that we make to ourselves before we incarnate. And they represent where it is that we help ourselves to evolve over the course of this lifetime. Now, as I said, as I'm recording this, we are in a time of transition between the North Node moving from Scorpio into Libra. And when this is happening to us on a collective level, it does tend to represent what we as a collective understand we need to work on in order to help ourselves to evolve collectively. And so the South Node is what you have your back to. It's what you're moving away from. And the North Node is what pulls you into your future, which helps you to fulfill those things you desire to do with this lifetime. And collectively, it's the North Node that pulls us into the future to help us to move towards, as I believe, to move towards greater love and greater wisdom, to move towards our spiritual evolution as well, and to grow as a collective. Because I do think, as I look at the planets, as I look at the sky, I think of it as a spiral, and we're spiraling up. And upwards is where we're moving towards greater love and greater wisdom. And it has to do with, friends and fans might know, I'm a big fan of Ibn Arabi. I wrote my MA dissertation on his work. He was hugely influential in my understanding of my practice. And he lived about 1,000 years ago. And he was a Sufi mystic, philosopher, and astrologer. And he was very much of the belief that everything that is in the chart is perfect. It is there to help you to fulfill your highest potential, even when it doesn't look like that. Even when it looks like this is something that's a liability, this is something that's a curse, this is something you could do without, this is a really challenging time or not. Ultimately, it's all part of moving us towards greater love and greater wisdom. And the way that he understood that, he called it the magnificent breath. And so he said that he has this great little essay called Whoso Knoweth Thyself Knoweth Thy Lord. And in this essay, he talks about how every ache, every longing, every sorrow, every joy that your heart experiences is a new way that God experiences itself in a way that it would never have had you not been there to experience that exact emotion in that exact moment. And in this way, by everything we feel, he called it the magnificent breath. It's as if God expands through us, through every emotion, every trial, every love, every longing, everything that we experience here is a way that God becomes bigger than God knew itself to be before. And I do believe that one reflection of this is how we as a culture, not as a culture, as a collective, right now, even with, some really bad things that happen in the world, we are now living in a time with greater equality than ever before, greater peace than ever before. And that's not to say there aren't some really horrible things that happen in the world still, and there aren't a lot of places and a lot of room for improvement still. And yet, it's like that spiral. We are moving upwards and we are expanding in our understanding. And I believe that we are experiencing greater equality and greater peace because we are recognizing the love and wisdom in everyone and everything more and more. We are recognizing that energy that we call God in more and more people, which is why equality becomes more and more possible. We're defining it more broadly. We're understanding that that expression is not limited to a certain physical box, if you will, but that it can be found in so many ways. And so when I look at a chart, I think about how the North Node ultimately is that pull towards greater love and greater wisdom. Whether it's happening collectively within a culture, whether it's happening individually in your own life as well. And so right now, collectively, we are at a time when the North Node is transitioning into the sign of Libra. And so on this planet, I do believe that we are going to start to understand over the next year and a half this whole idea of moving towards equality in relationships, balance in relationships, what it means to look at somebody face to face as an equal, what it means to sort of relax some of the power dynamics, if you will, that would be indicated as part of what's happening right now. We also have Pluto in Capricorn, which is all about the power dynamics. And we've got Uranus in Aries, which is all about challenging those power dynamics. And so we're going to have the South Node moving into Aries, which represents what we're moving away from. And so Aries is very much about this is what I want, and therefore it is. This is what I need to be true to myself, and this is how I'm going to share. And it doesn't matter how it speaks to whatever else is happening. It doesn't matter the effect. What matters is that I get to express, and I get to be, and I get to breathe. Like that's it. That's the essentials that matter. Where Libra tells us to be balanced, to be fair, to be diplomatic, if you will, to think as we are speaking, but also to consider other perspectives as we refine our own perspective, but also to consider partnerships in all the many forms. So there's one really obvious way. One has to do with relationships. And I'm thinking of how more and more countries are recognizing same-sex marriages and partnerships. And I think that's going to continue to be a very strong trend. Also, I do think that this whole idea of partnerships also just has to do with how we understand the other. And so there's a writer I remember from my undergraduate years, Julia Kristeva, and she wrote about, she has this book of essays called Strangers to Ourselves, and she writes about how we project all those things, what Jung would call the shadow. So we have the shadow self, which is all those things we deny are part of ourselves, and we project them onto people that we consider foreigners or we consider other to us, and say, oh, I am not like that, that is so not me, because that is bad. We reject that. But ultimately, we're all connected and everyone is a part of everything. And so, of course, that is in us. We don't know what's in us until we're being asked to call it forward. And so, when I look at the North Node in Libra, it does suggest a time when we are asked to look at other people. We're asked to sit down one-on-one, to think before we speak, to consider the other perspective, to find compromise, to negotiate. It's not about having what we want. It's not about exerting our will, which is very Aries, and which is the temptation. Aries is also a sign of force, right? So that's the temptation that's there. The South Node is what we want to move away from, but it's so tempting. And what's also interesting is that wherever the South Node is, we tend to manifest the lower vibration or the lower qualities of that sign. And wherever the north node is, we tend to manifest the higher qualities of that sign. And so every sign has a spectrum of expression. And you decide, depending on your sign or depending on what energy you're working with, you decide what kind of expression you're going to choose. Are you going to give into that lower end, or are you going to go for the high end? And so it's just so tempting. It's almost like a drug that's there. This whole, I can do it because I have the power and I have the force, and I have the guns, if you will, and I have the muscles, if you will. That's very South Node in Aries. But the North Node in Libra asks us to step beyond that, to look at another perspective, to look at the other, even when we think it's not part of who we are, to really consider what it is that it means to live in harmony. What does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? What has to happen in order for that to happen? What do we have to communicate? What do we have to share in order for that to happen? And it's during this time and it's during times when we look at where the North Node is, that really ends up defining a certain phase of people. What sort of strategies were used in the collective in order to advance us forward? What you also will see at this time is you're going to see examples as well of people doing things together. And what I mean by together is as partners, and coming up with really amazing solutions because there were two ideas instead of one. Because ultimately Libra is a sign of duality, and it's a sign of trying to find that middle ground within the duality. One thing I do also think with this is Libra is a sign of celestial Aphrodite. And so Socrates spoke about earthly Aphrodite, which is about earthly pleasure, which is very Taurus. Libra is celestial Aphrodite, as he called it, and it is basically understanding beauty in its highest form. And I think we're also going to see an exploration of that and a consideration of that. What does it mean? What does it mean when art is really beautiful, when a building is beautiful, when an idea is beautiful, when a philosophy is beautiful? What does that mean? What qualities does a person need to have to be considered beautiful in the highest sense? All of these are going to be highlighted now as we are asked to raise our understanding, to look at other people eye to eye, and to learn more about ourselves in the process. Well, thank you so much for your questions on the North Node moving into Libra. It is a time of change. It always is a time that asks us to take the opportunity to change for the better. And I do believe we're living through one of those times right now. And thank you for your questions. Of course, if you have a question, you can reach out on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and my website, nadiyashah.com. Thank you so much for this moment with you. Until we connect again, take care. Thank you for watching. It'll be a great month. Be fabulous and enjoy.